Today's talk's a little different than the usual. It's about failing at research instead of what my research stuff is. That's worth listening to. And if you're really interested, I can point you to some resources that I have. But today is all about the things that go wrong. To start, this part about how to fail at research is actually really easy. You just have to try doing some research, and at some point you'll fail along the way, and it won't take you too long. So it's not a talk about how to fail at research. It's more about how to recover from failing at research. So the overview of my talk is give a quick sketch of what I do. That'll take about 2 slides. And then there's 6 areas I want to discuss. One is that the field always changes, not so good ideas, collaboration can be hard, I've been scooped, rejections, and imposter syndrome. And so these are the kind of 6 challenging parts of research that cause setbacks and failures. And then I'll give some of my perspective after that. So my research overview, I do research in natural language processing. I'm sorry, I can't get rid of this. Those of you who are here, I can't get rid of it. There's something weird with the way my laptop is doing dock to bottom. So maybe that. Okay, there we go. Okay, so natural language processing is concerned with the interactions between computers and human language, in particular, how to program computers to process and analyze large amounts of natural language data. I teach the natural language processing class. That's CS 436 for the undergrads and 536 for the grads. The next time I teach it will be in the spring. There is a follow-on 633 research methods of deep learning course. NLP is a prereq because in NLP you get some practical experience with deep learning libraries, and that sets you up better for being ready to do the research methods class. The research methods class is only for the grad students though. I spend most of my time doing research in spoken dialogue systems, which is a subfield of NLP, so less about text. Like 95% of NLP researchers are interested in text. I'm interested in speech. So I'm interested in things like, what is language? How can children learn language? How do words come to mean what they do? How do humans learn meaning? How do humans represent meaning? Why is speech so different from written text? Why is language so ambiguous? What does it mean to understand? And these are all, you'll notice these aren't really computing questions. These are more cognitive science, neuroscience, child development, psychology, psycholinguistics questions. And I get a lot of inspiration from reading that literature. But I ultimately do want to implement these in a machine in a computational model. We want practical systems that actually work. So that's very high level view of the kind of research that I do. Let's dig in. Let's jump in now to the areas that I've picked out to talk about some of the challenges. Number 1, the field always changes. So when I started, a little history lesson here, or timeline, at least for me. In 2011, in October, I started my Ph.D. And you may not remember, but I do. In October of 2011, Siri came out. The Apple 4S came out, and there was this thing on it called Siri, and everyone was like, what's this thing? So they started using it, and Siri was kind of this first speech-based personal assistant that was made by a professional company. Before that, dialogue systems were kind of these laughable things. Siri was also itself kind of laughable, but they're like, joke's on you because we're collecting your data. And so they had all this speech data. Some people went and transcribed a lot of it. So at this point, there's tons of new data sets, and dialogue systems become kind of like an interesting research topic for a lot of people, thanks to Siri. 3 years later, I started seeing a lot more neural networks architectures for solving a lot of the computing problems, especially in my field. So neural networks were above everything, and this opened questions like, should I learn a specific language that implements a specific library? It was all these big questions. In 2016, a bunch of network architectures were really making a splash. We had CNNs in computer vision. We had LSTMs and recurrent neural networks in natural language processing. So neural networks are really coming a long way. This is where deep learning comes in. It's not just like a shallow neural network. Now we're getting to multi-layer neural networks, which is why it's called deep learning. And then in 2018, I get to transformers, and that just cracked open the field entirely. Seismically, huge shift in the field of natural language processing. So I'm trying to keep up with all of this. It's changing constantly, and anymore, I mean, even by 2020, if you were trying to publish a paper that didn't use transformers, reviewers would reject you offhand. It had to move. You had to move with the field that fast. So there's so many new things. What should I learn? A specific programming language? Here's a failure. Back in the day when HTML5 wasn't quite what it is, I learned a language called Flex ActionScript, and this was a really cool language for web development. Really cool animations, could make things look really nice. The big problem is, or was, it was built on Flash. Flash might predate some of you, but Flash was a really bad platform for pretty much anything. Flash animations, you've seen them. You don't see them very much anymore because Flash as a tool in a browser was so clunky and so bug-ridden and so a huge problem for security. So Chrome got rid of it. Everything else dumped it after that. So ActionScript Flex is gone. HTML5 is the winner. What about a specific library? Back when neural networks were new and people were kind of getting used to them, Theano was the big one, but it was clunky too. If I'm not mistaken, Google hired the guy who wrote Theano, and he turned that then into TensorFlow. But so if you spent time learning Theano, immediately you had to turn around and learn another one. And once you learned TensorFlow, immediately you had to figure out what Keras was and understand that. And then of course, Torch. So, and this isn't just in deep learning, it's in so many different areas. I've spent time learning libraries that I thought were really cool, but then suddenly no one's maintaining them, and you have to move on to the next thing or build or maintain it yourself. Specific architectures, I was teaching LSTMs in my natural language processing class just to make sure it was up to date. And then transformers came along and I was like, well, I don't have time to do LSTMs and transformers. So I had to take LSTMs out because of someone's body is, but you can do that anymore with just a webcam. Deep learning really makes a lot of things obsolete. Another one is, how do I keep up with the deluge of papers every year? I won't show you the ACL anthology where I get a lot of my research, or like ACM, but there's just the 2022 paper, thousands of them. I can't keep up with all of those. And I have my methodology for finding which papers I want and put them into a way to manage it. That's a talk for another day, but you're like, which papers do I even read? Do I need to go in depth in this one, or do I just read the, like, do I need to cite this? What do I do? So that's one. The field moves super fast and it's hard to keep up. And failures can happen because you're trying to make decisions about, okay, should I chase this or should I chase that? And sometimes you make the wrong ones. I certainly did many times. Two, sometimes you have not so good ideas. Here's a research project that I did with a student, this model that we came up with during my PhD. It's what we call a model for symbol grounding. The main idea is to train a binary class. For example, the word red, we give it a bunch of examples of red things, a bunch of examples of not red things, and we have it learn the difference between the two. And you can use this for lots of different tasks. The problem is the words assume they're associated with pictures, and there's a lot of words that aren't, like the word democracy. You can't, walk down the street and say, that's democracy right there, or that over there, that's utopia. There's things that are very abstract and don't have a visual representation. That's not good, where this model thinks everything should have a visual picture. Another thing is words are learned independently. So you could do a task, but it didn't matter what order the words were in the sentence. Yes? Yeah, it showed that, but it might be caught up now. If other people have video on, maybe we should ask them to turn their video off just to keep the bandwidth. Is that better? I hope that's better. We'll see. Okay. The idea to mitigate the problem of the word independence, is to put them all together in a graph. So I had a student spend a good semester and a half on this project, and we thought we were making progress when we realized that we were testing on our training data. So our results were super high, but they really actually weren't. They should have been much lower. And when we actually tested on the test data, it was pretty bad. I also knew a little about graphs. A student is best, and was a really good student. If anyone could have succeeded, it was that student, but we had to scrap the project. So I spent all this time, paid a student to work on it, and he didn't really get anything out of it, other than he got some practical experience programming, but no publications. Here's another one. Another project we started working on was a remote controlled robot. During the pandemic, I wanted students to be able to interact in class more than just via Zoom. So the idea is we had a couple of these robots, these Mr. Robotics. They're about this tall, about 18 inches. I have two of them, and they have microphones and cameras. So I thought, wouldn't it be cool if we could just set the robot on a table in a classroom and turn it on, and a student could access that. They could move the head, they could raise the hand, they could, watch the camera feed, they could hear the microphone feed. And I thought that would be cool to test. There's a lot of research questions associated with that. Getting it set up was kind of difficult. Streaming video was easy. Audio was another problem. The quality of the audio was not as good as like the lapel mic through Zoom. So only 4 students ever tried it out, and other people had the same idea and were working towards that. So I ended up not setup was a long time. Like setting up the robots in class beforehand, making sure the addresses were right so people could connect to them, writing the IRB, like this all took time, but I haven't gotten any, like I had to drop the project basically. Another one is Augie. I won't go too much into this. Chatbots were really big. In 2016, people were calling them the next app. I jumped on the bandwagon because they're kind of a sub area of dialogue systems, which is my primary research area. We developed a cool chatbot. It does, it's kind of a smart chatbot for contact list maintenance and being able to input new contacts and retrieve information very quickly. And it was really fun to build. And we had I've had, I think, 4 different students work on this, but after 5 years of working on it, I haven't published anything. And that's not to say nothing could be published. I tried to publish something, a long paper at a couple of conferences, and it got rejected 3 times. Number 3, collaboration can be hard. Here's a case study with St. Luke's. St. Luke's, if you don't know, is the biggest healthcare provider in Idaho. In fact, I think it's the biggest employer in Idaho. In 2016, when I was brand new here, they have this Boise State St. Luke's forum, and they invited someone from computer science to come because there was a lot of new hires, and they just wanted to think, what ideas are out there. So I went and pitched a few things, and that led to some other meetings and other ideas. And eventually they decided we want to really share data with Boise State. So they had to do this legal agreement stuff between the higher brass of the university, but they finally came up with the legal agreement about how they're going to share data. But they needed a project to test this agreement out, and they had a few to choose from, but mine was really ready to go. My project was this: collect audio between physician and patient during during a patient visit. Collect that audio, transcribe it automatically, and automatically eventually fill in electronic health records. Every physician watched this 20 years ago.
Excuse me, sorry.
Time in front of the electronic health record, that's a waste. They want to spend it in front of the patient.
Casey, can you?
So we got to work. We wrote the IRB. It took a lot of back and forth between Boise State and people at St. Luke's. Everyone's, of course, very professional, but we needed a way to share data, and the way we were going to do that was this third-party solution called Sherlock. That way, it's in the cloud, HIPAA compliant. That way, St. Luke's can put the collected data on this server, basically, this cloud thing that was really secure, and we would do our research on that in this secure environment. So we were ready to go right at the start of 2020, and of course, St. Luke's is a healthcare provider. They were dealing with pandemic like everyone, but they were at the front lines of it. So they said, no research projects, it's all pandemic. We're dealing with COVID right now. So we had to put our project on hold for 2 years. Well, we thought by the second half of 2021 we'd be able to do it, but then one of the students who was working on it said, I actually want to finish sometime, and who knows how long it's going to take for the pandemic to finish. So I'm going to do some other project. We hired a new person to work on it. Ryan actually is sitting right over here, ready to go again. But then just as we were ready to start things up again, the third-party solution, Sherlock, said, oh, it's great you're going to start up again, but we've tripled our prices, so pay up. And we were like, no, it was already too expensive. So now it's like way too expensive. So in the meantime, there's the new Cybersecurity Institute, and now they're kind of working on maybe something that could help us share data. That takes time. Right, so that's where we're at right now. 6 years, I haven't published anything. 6 years, I haven't even graduated a student who's worked on any of these projects. And there have been times where I was like, you know what, I don't want to do this anymore. But the people at the university are like, we need something. We need someone to get this through, so we can because if this works and we have a way to share data, many other researchers at Boise State can work with St. Luke's. St. Luke's is full of data, and there's all kinds of cool projects we can do. So we still do it. It can be hard. Some other projects I won't go into too much detail. I try to do some work with faculty in the Department of World Languages here at Boise State. It's been slow, not giving up, but we also can't spend a lot of time doing it. These things just take time and effort, but we know, but in our heart of hearts, we know it's worth the effort. I tried to work on a project with my former PhD advisor. I misunderstood our roles and ended up doing their part of the project, and that caused some friction for a few weeks. And no one wants to have anyone angry at them. You definitely don't want your advisor angry at them. I certainly didn't want my former PhD advisor mad at me for any. I lost a lot of sleep during that. It worked out, you know, everything's fine now, but man, during those couple of weeks when the misunderstanding happened and we had to kind of shuffle some things, that was not fun. And you feel really incompetent when those kinds of things happen. Moreover, collaborators have different demands and different schedules. So sometimes you're the person on the group project who's doing all the work, and sometimes somebody else is. Number 4, I've been scooped. Scooped means someone else published a paper that basically asked the same research question, had similar methodology to what you were working on, and they got it out before you did. That happened to the robot stuff, the in-class robot stuff, and that happened, shoot, what was the other one? Not the Augie stuff. Anyway, it's happened a couple of times to me in papers, and it does happen and it sucks. If you're a master's student and that happens and you're working on your thesis and you see this paper and it's like, you're like, this is my thesis topic. That's probably okay. You can still finish your thesis without too much changes. But if you're a PhD and you're trying to get your, you know, all the research done that makes up your dissertation, yeah, you can't. Scooping is not good. Yeah, so remote controlling robots in the classroom. The other one is this medical NLP stuff. Other people have been working on the same problem. They're collecting similar data. They're looking at it in a different way, so we can maybe position our stuff differently, but there's been so many advances in that area to automatically fill in electronic health records, to make transcriptions better, records better. So another thing I did, I wrote a proposal once to National Science Foundation. I proposed some novel work. It took 6 months for NSF to review. In the meantime, Amazon had published some updates to Alexa that made my proposed work obsolete. Because my claim in the proposal, some of the motivation was, you know, Alexa does this, it can't do these other things, which are super important for natural interaction. So I can imagine a reviewer looked at my proposal, you know, 6 months after I submitted it and said, huh, and then they turned to the left to their Alexa and said, Alexa, blah, blah, and use the exact examples from my proposal. And they're like, huh, it works. This will be an easy review. That sucked. Our current research, some of us are working on with my PhD students, attempts to make transformer language models smaller and multimodal. And it's novel stuff, but I mean, other people are working on this. In fact, I just bid for some papers at a conference, and one of the titles looked very suspiciously similar to some of the stuff we're doing. Other researchers are working on similar things. That's just the nature of research. You have ideas, other people have similar ideas. Number 5, rejections. Yeah.
People who are students like 11.
They're what?
People are students like number 11 on Zoom.
Okay, let's see what we can do here. Give me just 1 second. I'm going to stop sharing. Okay, Let me check the chat. Hearing's okay, but the slides weren't progressing on Zoom. Let's try this again. Oops, I actually have to share first, unfortunately. Something weird. Now I will plug in this in. Okay. Okay, number 5, rejections. Can we see it okay now? It's stuck here where I started it. Okay, so here's what we're gonna do. I'm going to try to join. So it's stuck. What if I don't start the slideshow? I have to troubleshoot here. Am I still on Zoom? I'm still on Zoom. Okay. So you can see the slides? Can you see then if I change it here? Can you see these changes?
Yeah. Interesting. Your mouse cursor is moving, but not.
So it's not refreshing the screen.
Yeah, your mouse cursor is moving, but not the.
Okay, so
probably we can just go on within the time and it's whatever is.
tell you what, I will
Yeah, if you can.
how about now?
share.
If I don't put the slides on the screen, can you see them okay now?
Yes.
Okay, so if I change that to something else, it
Yeah,
does
it's
work.
changing
Okay,
it.
so there's
So-
some strange interaction with the classroom here.
But yeah, everyone should go and Zoom then.
No, you should, and then share your screen here if you don't
I
mind.
need a
Oh, you need a dongle.
dongle. Have it then.
So just you're on Zoom, just share your screen to the students here, and we'll be up and running here in no time. Yeah, we'll link the slides at some point. Okay, this, and if I advance, you see it.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Great.
Okay.
Oh my God, it's better.
Let's do that. Okay. So, so we talked about Scooped. These are all the things I already talked about. They're just listed out here. Let's go to rejections, number 5. First of all, writing is hard. Scientific writing is also hard, and writing for a specific community takes a lot of experience. And it's hard to break into communities. For example, in my research, I do a lot of stuff with language, but we started using robots for platforms to test some of our theories. And that means we had to break into the robotics and the human-robot interaction community. And the reviews there, they review it very differently. And you have to position the papers a lot differently. It just takes a lot of time and experience. So here's a handful of the rejections that I've had over the past 4 or 5 years. Some of these are very high ranking conferences that are just hard to get into, like it's 20% acceptance rate for ACL, for example. HRI is a little bit lower. SIGDA is a little bit easier to get into at like 35%, but the Human Aging Interaction Conference is an ACM conference, but it's actually it's not as hard to get into. But I've had papers rejected from even the HAI conference. This doesn't include papers from collaborators. This is just kind of my stuff with my lab directly. So there's a lot of rejections. Some people have more, some people get lucky or just are really good at it. I'm not so good at it that everything gets accepted. Are you, Jerry? No, okay. Nasir, no? Okay, 3 for 3 here. Some of the rejections turned into later accepted papers. I'll talk about that later. Paper reviews are largely helpful. Sometimes they are unfair and sometimes they're downright mean. Some reviewers are jerks or they're in a bad mood that day. And if that does happen, you should report them to the program committee chairs. because even if your paper is so bad that they just think it's terrible, they should still be professional about it and try to give you suggestions about what to do next. Has that happened to me? Yeah, this was my face. I've been pretty lucky, but I'm on the SIGDAO general board and I've gotten some complaints about reviewers from some of the other papers. So I'd rather have a mean review than a super short one. That's just me. Yeah, that's my face when I get those. Proposal rejections. Some of you aren't here yet, but just so you know, this happens a lot, and these hit hard because the stakes are high. Proposals represent a lot of work. They're usually 15 pages of super dense. Like if you think your thesis has a lot of citations, the latest proposal I had, I think I had 130 citations, and they're like all super, it's super dense. And you're proposing work you're going to do. You're asking for money to fund grad students. So we want these things, you want these things, but here's a handful of some of the rejections I've gotten. These are ones where I'm either co-PI or PI. There's just as many of these where I've been other roles like senior personnel or some other collaboration. Lots to NSF, some to some companies where they have these annual things, one to NIH and some to IGEM, which is Idaho only. But man, the competition is really stiff. I've only resubmitted proposals twice. Both happen to be funded, because usually when you get a proposal back and they're like, no, this isn't good, you're on to the next thing. It's like 6 months later. Like, okay, that's old news. I'm on to this new thing. In some cases, sometimes that's not the case. Resubmissions sometimes work. Reviews are usually positive because they are checked by a program officer at NSF. They're not mean, but sometimes they're not helpful. Sometimes it's like, this is just, we don't know if this is good. This isn't clear. That's not clear. That's not clear. And you're like, well, it's not clear about it. A little more help here, but they only have so much time to review these things. Okay, so number 6, imposter syndrome. It's true. You are being judged. Your advisor is constantly judging your skills, technical research, new ideas, communication, collaboration, teamwork, individual work, leadership, etc. Paper reviewers are judging your writing. That's your ability to communicate new scientific knowledge your work brings to the world as the gatekeepers of science. It's what their job is. It's how the system works, for better or for worse. Proposal reviewers are judging your ability to see long-term research project through. And you are judging yourself because you're trying to make changes in many aspects to yourself. At least I hope you are, to some degree. Many of us are our own worst critic. So that kind of leads to imposter syndrome. It's a real thing. And you might be thinking, here's some things that people who have imposter syndrome think. I'm not as smart as everyone else. Everyone else seems so capable, but I keep failing. This project's not going anywhere despite my best efforts. I can't keep up with all the new stuff. Another proposal paper rejection. I can't seem to ever finish a project properly. I always have to stop before it's perfect. And so on, right? This goes through my head a lot. I think at least once a year for all of these. Multiple times a year for paper rejections. And I'm not terrible at research, I don't think, but man, they hit and it hurts. So those are the 6 things. The field always changes, not so good ideas, collaboration can be hard, I've been scooped, rejections, imposter syndrome. There's others, but these are the ones that I'm focusing on today. So that's all the negative stuff. Now I want to hopefully move and end on a positive note and some encouragement and hopefulness for everybody. So my perspective on how to fail. Number 1, here's a perspective. So this is a mindset thing. You're human. The learning process requires failure. If you fail, you are learning. Scientists always ask, what can we learn? And if you're learning, you're failing. That means scientists always fail. We can do like modus ponens and stuff like that and all the syllogisms if you want to get logical about this. Scientists, because you're in the market and in the business of learning, you're going to fail because that's what learning means, usually. Children learn, for example, how to walk by walking, how to talk by talking. They're bad at it at first. Failure is required. And you might think, well, children are cute though. It's cute to see them stumble and fall, and it's cute to see them babble and say sentences wrong. It is. And you're like, well, I can't get away with that. Probably not, but you still have to learn. One learns how to play a musical instrument by playing it, how to play a sport by playing it, or how to do fine art by doing fine art. Failure is required. My daughter, who's 14, loves to draw. And recently she started drawing faces, like she was drawing all the Avengers faces, you know. And she shows these to me after she's done. She only spent like an hour doing it. And I was like, these are amazing. I knew who everyone was. And she said, I tried doing something like this a year ago, like an exact difference between what the improvements she's made over the year. And she looks at it as, I'm just getting better, not mistakes. I'm just getting better. And she really is getting better, but that's a mindset thing. She keeps getting better and better, but she does look back and look at her progress. And you just get good at it by doing it. You learn how to write by writing. So now we're at what you do. You learn how to write by writing, propose by proposing, program by programming, research by researching. Failure is required. Sometimes you get lucky and maybe your first paper gets accepted. Sometimes you get lucky, maybe your first proposal gets funded. Maybe your program runs, and I don't think I've ever, I mean, maybe a small program, but write a fair-sized program for an assignment, you probably don't get it right the first time. You probably have to compile it and run it many, many times before it's ready to submit as, you know, and to be graded for your class. I'm just guessing here. Right? Adam, Harry, you probably have to do it lots of times. It's normal, but it's that process of failing on your own many, many times that gets you better at programming. Everything you do is practice. Even established physicians call what they do practice, and that kind of freaks me out. A physician goes to med school, they go to do their residency, and then they go work with some clinic or some hospital, and then a few years later they're like, I'm going to strike it out on my own. I'm going to start my own practice. And you're like, by now, shouldn't you not be practicing? Shouldn't you be good at this? And we shouldn't be calling it practicing, but that's what it is. Like, even physicians are like, we don't know everything. We're pretty good at a lot of stuff, but there's a lot of things we don't know. I am yet to be able to work on a project, paper, or proposal and consider it perfectly done. So there's that part. It's never done. The paper's never done. You could iterate through it one more time and iron it out some more, wordsmith some more. You could rework this paragraph or that paragraph, and you should as much as you can, but you're also human and you only have so much time. So sometimes good enough is good enough. I have this thing hanging on my wall. It's in Japanese. This says sonomama de igana, which means it's fine the way it is. It's good. It's good the way it is. And that's not, you don't want to have that be everything, like, I did a crappy job, but it's fine the way it is. You want to do the best you can, but at some point you're like, it's good enough. I'm going to move on to the next thing, because you have lots of things coming at you all the time. Oh, that's by Mitsuo Aida, by the way, a really famous Japanese calligrapher and poet. Okay, number 2, failure means you're trying. It took me a long time to understand object-oriented programming. I didn't really understand probability and information theory well into my PhD, even though I'd taken statistics, I'd taken machine learning classes. I had done a lot of assignments that required it. It didn't click until I was doing my own research project where I had to propose kind of a new model, and then I really had to know that stuff inside and out. I didn't understand what research really meant until I was halfway done with my dissertation. This was fun. I'd published papers, but for my dissertation, my advisor said, okay, we've been co-authors on a lot of papers. I've seen your writing improve a lot over the years. You can basically, you're at the point where you can write a paper on your own. I just check it and see minor changes and resubmit it. That's great. But your dissertation, that's yours. That's all you. I will give you feedback at 2 points. 1, the outline. 2, the end. When you're done, I will spend 30 minutes, and whatever I can get done in 30 minutes, I will give you feedback, having spent that much time on your dissertation. The rest, I'm not giving you individual chapter feedback. I'm not giving you full dissertation feedback. I ain't doing that. It's your document. It's not my job. Because at the PhD level, you are becoming an independent researcher, and the dissertation is where he said, that's where you're going to show us that you're an independent researcher. So you better believe I spent time in the library. I stepped away from the computer. I read books. I read papers. I read and read and read. I read more during the first half of my dissertation writing than I did the entire PhD. And I had read a lot up until then. But I wanted to make sure everything was right, that I wasn't making any claims that and I was citing the right papers in the right places, and I understood exactly what my contribution was and what it wasn't. And that took a lot of redrafting and rethinking. And that's where it really clicked. This is research. I have to adjust my teaching methods all the time. It's never done. I've taught 354 like 7 times, and I'm adjusting it this semester, and I'm like, nope, gotta adjust it again. Okay, so those are 2 mindset things that I just want you to bring with you. One is your human learning process requires failure, and failure means you're trying. If you don't fail, you're probably just not doing anything. At least nothing, maybe nothing interesting. Okay, now this one slide is how to handle failure. At least how I look at it. 1, I'm being patient with yourself. You are a work in progress. I haven't met someone who isn't a work in progress. I turn 40 years old soon. I'm still a work in progress. I think most of you are younger, except for maybe Jerry. Okay, we'll go with that. 2, on handling projects that don't seem to be going anywhere, sometimes you keep going, sometimes you have to cut your losses. The St. Luke stuff, we're still going on it. It takes time. It's going to take more time before we get one thing out of it, but it'll be worth it, I think. But the other projects that I've started and cut, it's sad because we have all this work that we did and nothing happened with it. Those are hard decisions to make. And sometimes you have to cut the losses and then you move on to something bigger and better. Sometimes the student who is working on it graduates. Sometimes you keep getting scooped and you have to do something completely different. That's just part of research. Okay, here's one where I want to spend a little time working with others, communication, handling feedback, all the judgments that come upon you. Hanlon's razor. This is a mantra of mine. Hanlon's razor is kind of like Occam's razor, but different. It posits that you never attribute to malice that which is adequately explained by stupidity. So things happen to you. People seem mean to you, paper rejection, all these failures, all these challenges, and other people are involved. Most of the time, it's not because they're malicious. If your advisor gives you feedback on your paper or on your writing or whatever, and it seems brutal, they're not being malicious, usually. It's not, and stupidity is probably the strong word here. It's probably more like misunderstanding. Following Hanlon's razor has made my marriage a lot better because I never assume my spouse is malicious or my children. I never assume that they're doing something out of malintent, even if it's clear to me that they are. I always act as if I believe that they are with the best interests and that they're, because I don't want them to think that I ever look at them maliciously. I don't want to have that relationship with them. And that's not to say that malicious things don't happen. There are mean people out there and they'll do things for awful reasons. But I err on the side of misunderstandings first, and then if proven guilty, then malice comes. But I've been right most of the time, and I've been wrong a couple of times where someone took advantage of that kind of naive approach to life. But I like living like that. But really, what I'm saying is this is a fancy way of saying you need a bit of humility when you get feedback from people, when people talk to you, when you get paper rejects and you're looking at the reviews. You need an ounce of humility going into it, or you're not going to learn. You can't learn without it. All right, this helps you identify failures and mistakes, enabling you to learn. Okay, on handling scoops, look closely. Something is probably different. You may need to pivot. When in doubt, contact the authors, talk to your advisor or someone in the field. So this one, when I was writing my dissertation, another dissertation got published about 3 months before mine, before I was done, rather. And it looked like it was exactly what I was trying to do. And it was from Berkeley. And I was in lowly Bielefeld. And I thought, okay, if someone from Berkeley is doing this, this is probably a big deal and they probably scooped me. I read their dissertation and it wasn't all that good. And they were doing things sufficiently different from my method and approach and motivation that it wasn't a scoop. That can happen. On handling rejections, you get a paper rejection. The email comes, or you get a proposal rejection, the email comes, and the first line says, "We regret to inform you, ... And it hurts. It hits you really hard. So what I usually do is I get up and I go for a walk, because you can't focus on anything at that point. You get up and I go for a walk or a bike ride or a hike or go to the gym or something active, because you need to blow off steam. Because everything's coming in your head. You're questioning your own existence. You're questioning what you're doing here. You're like, is this worth it? I hate these rejections. And then you complain and complain and complain. Do all of that because you're human. Take an hour or two. I don't know how long it takes. Some people might take a few days. But then stop, catalog the wins. Sometimes when I get a rejection and I go on blow off steam, I sit down and I look at my publication history and I'm like, yeah, I'm not so bad. I can do this. It's okay. A little bit of reassurance. And you can do that if you're not doing so well in a class. Go back and look at your, the classes that you've finished. Those were hard classes. Give yourself a pat on the back a little bit. You've got some wins in your bag. Then give it a couple of days and then go back and actually read the review with some humility, thinking, what can I learn from this review? How can I improve my writing? How can I make this paper stronger? 6, on imposter syndrome. If you made it this far, do you really think you can't take the next step? You're in a class, you're struggling, but when you look back and think, you know what, I finished 321. That was a hard class. I can do this class too. Or some grad class. If you finish 533, you can probably do anything. This is a tough class. And that goes for everything. I don't know a faculty member here at Boise State who doesn't feel imposter syndrome to some degree or has. And if you don't feel some degree of imposter syndrome, I think that's actually a bigger problem, because then you're full of yourself. And if you're full of yourself, you're not going to learn. And you're not going to get better at this stuff. So that's where you need to be a little bit careful. Unless you truly are talented and skilled and gifted and you never have any mistakes and you're awesome. I want to meet you and I want to learn from you, but I haven't met that person yet. Okay, so that's my one slide on some tips on how to handle failure. I do want you to know that I don't just fail. Here's some wins. And I keep this slide up to date on kind of my ultimate goal in research is this understanding stuff of language understanding, and the backbone to that is semantics. And I have all these different areas that are in service of that, all this different research that I do. This doesn't have all the research that I've done in collaboration. For example, the CAS project's not on here. This is just kind of my lab directly. But these are some wins that I've had in my research group. And I look at this and I think there's some cool stuff that we've done, some really cool stuff. And there's so much stuff left to do. But this gives me hope that, like, okay, I may have imposter syndrome, I may have all these failures, but I have some wins. And those are worth celebrating. I've had some rewarding collaborations. Dr. Fales, Dr. Para, Dr. Landau Wright over in the College of Engineering. This is and awesome students. I haven't mentioned much the CAS project here, and we've done some really cool stuff. We've had some wins there, and we've had our challenges there as well. But I've learned a lot through that collaboration. I've worked with some researchers at Florida State University. One of the researchers came to a conference and she said, I want to use dialogue more in the classroom for language learning, dialogue systems. And I said, well, it just so happens that I have this thing that you could potentially use. So we worked on this gamification of language learning in the classroom and got this really cool publication out of it. It took a few tries. We got some rejects. But I thought it was really cool when we finally got done with it. Did some work with some Italian researchers. I read a paper in 2017 that I thought was awesome. It was a cognitive science paper. I contacted the author, he was very responsive, and we very slowly worked on some ideas that was kind of the next thing. But it was like I would work on it one afternoon, 1 month, and then email him what I had. And then a month later, he'd email me back and say, well, what about this? And this was just slow going for 4 years. Finally, we got somewhere. And a student, Flo, you may know Flo, she graduated from our program, from bachelor's program earlier this year, and took it on as a class project and got and now it's under review, but we actually just got the review back and they want minor revision and it'll be accepted to a pretty good journal. So it's really cool to see this stuff happen. I put Italian researchers because Flo is Italian and the guy I was working with, the collaborator was also he's in Italy right now. So there's another project called Redico, just infrastructure. I love these collaborative projects. Sometimes they're hard. Actually, all of them are hard because you have to communicate and use words with each other that mean different things in different fields, but it's worth the effort, really worth the effort. Even though failures can happen in collaboration and it's easier to silo your own research and not work with anybody, collaborations are worth the effort. Some students, I only have the students, like I said, in my direct research group, not really anyone from bigger projects that I've worked on. These are the students that I've worked on who are still in my group right now. I hope I haven't forgotten anybody, and then former students who have moved on to bigger and better things. This is the cool stuff. Like when I say collaboration, working with students is one of the reasons I get up in the morning and come to work and do this. I mean, teaching classes and everything, but working with students in research projects is the one-on-one stuff that I like to do with students. The mentoring, the writing, the growing, I just love it. So I'm going to stop there, and instead of saying thank you, say good luck, because you need it.